Seeing yourself on the big screen in movies is something you can only dream of. So when you finally get that opportunity, you take full advantage of it. But what happens when the character you portray takes over and life becomes a blur? This is the story of Lloyd Avery II. Before I get any further into this video, I'm Courtney Elise, aka Court Crimes TV, and welcome to my channel. Lloyd Fernandez Avery II was born June 21st, 1969 to parents Lloyd Sr. and Linda Avery. He grew up in View Park, a working class neighborhood next to Baldwin Hills, aka the Black Beverly Hills. He grew up in a nice home with a pool in their backyard. Lloyd Sr. was a man of many trades. He was a plumber, electrician, and a carpenter with his own business, while Linda was a stay-at-home mother until she got a job at the bank in the late 1980s. They had a very comfortable life. His brother Shay said they were silver spoon kids. They never needed for nothing. Lloyd would attend Beverly Hills High School, where he excelled in baseball and water polo. Education was very important in the Avery household, and Linda enrolled her children into school integration programs. Going to such a popular high school, Lloyd became friends with some very well-known kids of celebrities such as Quincy Jones, Smokey Robinson, and Clarence Savant. Lloyd was very shy and mild-mannered, but those closest to him said he was a very fun person to be around. Along with his personality, he was extremely good-looking, and the girls were attracted to him. Lloyd didn't drink, nor did he do drugs, but he did attend parties in the Hollywood mansions on the weekends. It's said that instead of drinking at these parties, they would play a game called Party and Pooch. Basically, they would steal shit at parties just to steal shit, said longtime friend Dorian Reed. After graduating high school, Lloyd would attend Los Angeles Trade Technical College, but would soon drop out. He didn't follow in his father's footsteps by being a man of many trades, because he had a serious passion for music. His father, on the other hand, did not approve of him dropping out of college, so much so that he took a baseball bat to his son's SP-1200, which is a beat maker. Lloyd Sr. breaking his sampler would lead to Lloyd being arrested in June of 1990 for stealing studio equipment from a Guitar Center. Even though Lloyd had this minor crime under his belt, he would get his big break around this time. Lloyd was good friends with up-and-coming filmmaker John Singleton. John was working on his debut film called Boys in the Hood. While filming was going on, Lloyd was always on set to show his friends some support. This is when John asked Lloyd to be in the movie. Lloyd was easy to work with, and he took direction well from John, who was meticulously preparing Lloyd for his big scene. John showed him how to point a gun, what to do with his eyes, and how to appear simultaneously cold-hearted and menacing, because there's a difference between the two. Every single detail was important in John's eyes. No detail was too small. Lloyd's character was Knucklehead number 2, and the day of the infamous scene didn't start off too great. Like I said before, Lloyd was described as very easy to work with and a humble guy. And on the day of the shooting scene, Lloyd greeted Cuba Gooding Jr. and Cuba snapped on him by saying, "Don't effing talk to me right now." Now, Cuba was a method actor. A method actor is an actor who aspires to complete emotional identification with the part. Basically, they fully embody the particular character they're playing. And Cuba was mentally and emotionally preparing himself to witness his best friend's murder. He had been in his trailer all morning getting in that frame of mind, and when Lloyd greeted him, it made him snap. An assistant quickly diffused the situation and filming ensued. Despite friction on the set, that scene of Lloyd Ricky became iconic. That scene made Lloyd an instant celebrity around Los Angeles. Everyone recognized him wherever he went. I mean, he was 6'1" with hazel eyes, beautiful skin. He was fine. His new fame let him glide with ease past the velvet ropes of nightclubs. To really capitalize on his newfound fame, he hired an assistant. He went to numerous auditions, and everything was going his way. Lloyd's love of music also started to take off at this time. He produced Push, the lead single for actress Tisha Campbell's debut album, Tisha. It was featured on an episode of Martin. Lloyd would land another acting gig in John Singleton's newest movie called Poetic Justice, starring Tupac and Janet Jackson. He played Thug Number 1, similar to his role as Knucklehead Number 2 in Boys in the Hood. Lloyd's character would once again murder an innocent person, like he did in Boys in the Hood. This was part of John's plan to nurture Lloyd, who was an untrained actor. Poetic Justice was an incredibly different movie from Boys in the Hood. It was a love story centered on themes like loneliness and trust, and features Maya Angelou's poetry. The film didn't do well. In fact, it flopped big time with critics and underperformed at the box office. Lloyd wasn't impressed with it either, and he let it be known. At the premiere, once the film was over, Lloyd stood up and shouted, "That shit was whack, John." Lloyd was out of line for doing that. They were friends, and Lloyd could have spoke to John privately about how he feels instead of blasting him in front of everyone. Even though he was totally disrespectful, this incident didn't affect their friendship, but these outbursts would start to become expected of him. This would also start the shift in Lloyd's personality. Shortly after the outburst with John, Lloyd began living with Quincy Jones III. He was a producer and filmmaker known as QD3 in the Jungle, where Lloyd was already a legend because of Boys in the Hood. People in the hood gave Lloyd a pass because he killed someone as a blood in the film. He really started to embody that role. He let it get in his head. He couldn't separate real life from acting. Baldwin C. Sykes, a native of Compton who played Monster in Boys in the Hood, said he too received the same treatment, but he would tell fans he's not down with the hood. It was just an acting role. Lloyd really started to shock people when he started claiming blood. To friends, this came out of left field because Lloyd grew up near Crip territory. Plus, he knew the hazards that came from gangbanging. The gang life had already claimed his younger brother. Shay Avery was an incredibly smart young man, and still is, coming out of Beverly Hills High School. He had a 3.6 GPA and was admitted to UC Berkeley and UCLA, but he didn't attend either. Shay said in the Los Angeles Times article from 1992 that he just felt some kind of attraction to the streets. Unlike Lloyd, he didn't befriend any rich kids at school, though he did party with the Menendez brothers on prom night. Though he wasn't gangbanging yet, he felt he had an image to live up to. Shay would eventually form a crew called DGFS, which stood for Don't Give a F's. I'm not gonna say the full word, but you know what I'm talking about. His crew wasn't up to anything special. Every night they went out looking for trouble and getting wasted on Old English. Shay was already known, but he started to become feared. Like one time, a friend by the name of Dorian Reed said Shay went to a party and another gang was there. All of a sudden, he started throwing rocks at them. He said that the other gang was like, "What the F is going on?" Then they realized it was Shay and was like, "That's Shay? Let's go." That's just how wild he was. Others knew not to play with him, and now his big brother was out here wilding out as well. Shay would level up in the gangbanging world from DGFS to Rollin' 60s Crips, a Crip set from Slauson, their most famous member being Nipsey Hussle. Shay was expected to put in work, and he was ready for any and everything that came with this lifestyle. He would carry around a .22 caliber revolver, and it made him feel invincible. Shay's decisions would land him in the California penal system. That's crazy. But back to Lloyd. Lloyd was stacking up cases. He had burglary and weapons possession charges. QD3 compared Lloyd's actions in life in the jungle to that of Bishop from Juice. Every day got a little crazier. Lloyd's aggression came from the fact that no one wanted to book him. He'd auditioned, but due to his reputation and horrible attitude, nothing was working. He wanted to be a star, but it was becoming evident that it wasn't happening. His auditioning was lackluster. He started to become lazy. His friend Dorian Reed said that he auditioned him once and thought if that's how he was auditioning, he wasn't going to get anything. Lloyd was also starting to become very disrespectful to those who helped start his career. Even after his antics at the Poetic Justice premiere, he continued to go at his friend John Singleton. He would constantly call John late at night and even lashed out and called him a punk ass nigga. It got so bad that John eventually stopped taking his calls. His music career also took a hit, so this is where he really started to get heavily involved in the streets. He really loved the fact that the hood embraced him for what he did in a movie, but he wanted more. He wanted to earn his stripes. He started to become isolated and even got a tattoo of the letter J in Old English font above his left eyebrow. In the beginning of 1999, Lloyd lived alone in an office building in Santa Barbara Plaza. For money, he'd cash small residual checks and wash cars for $5. Police also believe that he sold crack as well. Lloyd wouldn't stay in that office building for long, because in April of 1999, he would flee after an altercation with members of the Nation of Islam. He left in the middle of the night and stayed at his grandmother's house. Lloyd's life was getting out of control. His siblings would go on to graduate college. Even Shay turned his life around. He was a father of a little boy and even went back to school. But Lloyd was too engrossed in the street life. Education was the last thing on his mind. Lloyd would end up moving from his grandmother's house and share a house at a Hollywood crash pad with 4 surfer brothers. This would be short-lived because he snapped and maced his roommate's mother. He also maced an MTV DJ at a nightclub. His life was going downhill fast. He would seem violent one minute and apologize the next. It seemed as though he knew he was falling hard. So in an attempt to change within himself, he started attending church. He'd get dressed up and go, but when it was time for the sermon, he'd leave and just walk around outside. His aunt Carol Avery said, "I figured he was struggling and Satan was pulling at him to keep him from hearing the lesson." Lloyd wanted to change, but he was so involved in the streets, his life was getting more and more dangerous by the minute. On July 1st of 1999, at around 4 p.m., while hanging around in the jungles, Lloyd approached Annette Lewis and Percy Branch. According to police reports, once Lloyd approached them, an argument ensued over a deal. He then pulled out a .45 caliber pistol and fired at them. He shot at Annette before turning his gun on Percy, who was shot in the stomach. Annette died that same day, while Percy died 3 weeks later due to complications. Now you would think, after committing a double murder, he would go into hiding. But no, not Lloyd. He didn't go on the run. Instead, he went straight to his grandmother's house. While staying at his grandmother's house, his agent told him he had booked a movie role. July 14th, 1999, just 13 days after killing Annette and Percy, he was in New Mexico filming the movie Lockdown. The movie was shot in Cell Block 4 at the Penitentiary of New Mexico. This location was the scene of one of the most deadliest prison riots in U.S. history. That section of the prison was closed down in 1998, but there were still relics of the violence that occurred there, such as axe marks where snitches were decapitated. The air was filled with tension, obviously, but to let loose and unwind, the crew would go to a local bar after filming. Lloyd, however, didn't mingle with his castmates. Like I said, he was a loner. He preferred to stay in his hotel room. Though the one time he did decide to go out with everyone, he ended up fighting with one of the lead actors, DeAndre Bonds. A tattoo artist ended up breaking up the fight, which led to Lloyd feuding with the hair and makeup department. Lloyd told the makeup department head, Melanie Mills, that he was going to find her and her family when he got back to LA, and that he was going to murder them. Lloyd got into several altercations while on set. You know, he thought he could fight with anyone. He thought people feared him. He thought he was big stuff, but he was sadly mistaken. He ran into a major problem on set when he called himself constantly antagonizing Master P. Master P was one of the stars and producers of the film, and the director of the film said that Master P's guys came up to him and said, "Do you want us to F him up?" Like, they were just fed up with Lloyd's actions. Lloyd had to be disciplined, so as a result, they cut some of Lloyd's scenes and eventually threw him off set. The day Lloyd was fired, he was smoking a Sherm stick on the back of a grip truck during his lunch break while blasting music from a stolen radio. When asked to return it, he flashed out and stormed into the makeup room and lunged towards Melanie Mills. Once again, the tattoo artist on set came in between and punched Lloyd in the face, making him bleed everywhere. He was then chased off set by Master P's crew and ran towards the new prison down the road. Still dressed up as a prisoner, he scaled a tall barbed wire fence, and at that moment sirens blared and were drawn. Producers from the film had pleaded with guards and snipers to stand down. Once everything settled, Lloyd was ordered to leave the state of New Mexico. Despite all the chaos that went down, Lloyd was still very optimistic about having a career in acting. When he returned back to LA, he did more auditions and even wrote a movie script called G in a Bottle, kind of like Kazam featuring Shaq. In 2001, he landed a role as gangster G-Ride in the movie Shot, an independent low-budget indie film. It documented the life on the dangerous streets of South Central LA. This would be his most influential role. Like Cuba in Boys in the Hood, the director of Shot saw Lloyd as a method actor for this role. Lloyd became completely invested in this role. He asked the director to address him as G-Ride and kept his prop gun tucked into his waistband. It came naturally to him, and it showed in his performance. But as usual, things would start to sour on set. Lloyd started to bully and intimidate Roger Roth, who was the director of the film. He even threatened to kill him. He just switched. He was really self-sabotaging anything good that came his way. Also, the double murder he committed was still being investigated. He was still a wanted man. Shay remembers the last night he spent with his brother as a free man. He said they were sitting in the two-car garage of his grandmother's house on Crescent Heights Boulevard near Beverly Hills. He recalled Lloyd saying, "I've had a good life." Lloyd spent the rest of that night sleeping on the floor of his grandmother's bedroom. LAPD were well aware of Lloyd's exact location, and the next morning they made an arrest. Shay said he remembered the helicopters being louder than usual, and there was lots of traffic outside his grandmother's house. Lloyd was in the kitchen with his bike, and before he left through the back door, he gave Shay one last hug. He made his way up Crescent Heights Boulevard, making a U-turn where he pulled alongside the driver's side door of a police cruiser. He leaned forward and asked the officer, "What's up?" and then sped off. He would then collide into another police vehicle and was arrested for the double murders. He considered his arrest to be fate. He knew prison offered him a chance to turn his life around. While awaiting trial at the North County Correctional Facility, he found God and salvation in Chaplain Dennis Clark's congregation. Dennis Clark would notice Lloyd sitting in the front row during Bible study. Soon he would speak with Dennis about what he was reading in the Bible. After 2 years in jail, he went to trial. Lloyd took the stand in his own defense, claiming he was somewhere in Hollywood at the time of the murders. He then clashed with Deputy District Attorney Chunt, who claimed that such a weak alibi offered little to prove his whereabouts. In the end, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. In March of 2001, he arrived at Pelican Bay State Prison. While there, he stayed out of trouble and was mostly preoccupied with spreading the word of God. In August of 2005, Lloyd was paired up in a double cell with another inmate. That inmate was Kevin Roby, an Air Force Academy dropout and paranoid schizophrenic, serving a life sentence for the horrific and murder of his sister in January of 1987. Also while in prison, he became a devout Satanist. Polar opposites of Lloyd. Lloyd believed the divine offered him an opportunity in this living arrangement. He wrote to the chaplain, "I know God has him around me for a reason." That letter was dated August 29th of 2005. Now what really happened in that jail cell, only Kevin truly knows. Kevin claimed that Lloyd tried to convert him, and he warned Lloyd numerous times to stop preaching about God. Now, I don't know about y'all, but if a Satanist tells me to stop talking about God around him, I'm gonna stop. I'm going to mind my business and let him do what he has to do, and I am just going to continue to do what I love to do and worship God myself. I'm not going to try to convert anybody. That's his business and this is my business. You know what I'm saying? Okay. On the evening of September 4th of 2005, things would turn violent between the two. Kevin said that he choked Lloyd until he was unconscious. He then placed Lloyd's body in bed under the covers. Over the next day and a half, officers made 11 counts of the inmates, which also included a standing count. Lloyd was counted each time. Kevin would tie strings to Lloyd's body and control his movements like a marionette puppet to fool the COs. He then drew a pentagram on the floor and positioned Lloyd's body on it. He then painted the wall with Lloyd's blood as part of a satanic ritual, as a warning to God. He did a lot more to Lloyd's body, but it's way too graphic and disgusting to put on YouTube. It took approximately 38 hours for officers to discover Lloyd's body. When COs entered the cell, Kevin was handcuffed and Lloyd's body was transferred to the infirmary. They tried to perform CPR despite the fact that his body was already decomposing. Lloyd was officially pronounced dead at 12:10 p.m. This story is so sad because Lloyd Avery was such an attractive person. He was incredibly handsome. He was talented. He grew up in a very well-to-do family. But unfortunately, he spiraled out of control by trying to portray something he really wasn't. You know, his family tried to take Kevin Roby to court, but I mean, it really didn't make any sense to go through a trial because Kevin was already in jail for murder and life. But man, it's just so sad to see a talent like this wasted. You know, he could have been like a Tay Diggs, a Laz Alonso, you know, and it's sad his life was taken like this. But rest in peace to you, Lloyd. If you want to continue to discuss this case down in the comments, please feel free to comment and I will respond.